I remember when I was learning English in school, in general English classes, I was very frequently told that phrasal verbs are really good and we would learn all these phrasal verbs to, to sound more natural, I suppose, to sound more informal, right? But then when I started doing my thesis and started writing academic English, it turned out that most of those phrasal verbs were actually wrong because they were making my writing more informal. So in this video, I want to talk very quickly about using phrasal verbs in academic writing. If you're new here, my name is Marek Kiczkowiak. I run Academic English Now, where I help university students and researchers write better papers and theses. And if you're enjoying this video, then please consider subscribing and hitting that bell button so you don't miss future videos and we can continue learning academic writing together. So perhaps first of all, what are phrasal verbs? Well, phrasal verbs are basically verbs and prepositions where the preposition can really change the meaning of the verb. And the short answer to the question whether you can use phrasal verbs in academic writing is no. But obviously, as we are in academia, things are never black and white or correct and incorrect, right? We need to think about it a little bit more critically. So in general, the rule is you should probably avoid as many phrasal verbs as you can. However, there are a few phrasal verbs that you can use, and if you're interested in that, then definitely continue watching this video because towards the end I'm going to show you those phrasal verbs that you should use in academic writing. But let's perhaps look at a couple of examples of phrasal verbs that are informal and you should avoid so you kind of know what words we're talking about here. So in here I mean phrasal verbs like, for example, bring down. Bring down basically means to reduce something, and a better word for bring down would be precisely reduce. Another example would be to come up with something. For example, a scientist, a researcher can come up with a theory. That's informal. Instead, you could say they created a theory, they invented or developed a theory. Another very common phrasal verb that I see people use very often in academic writing is, for example, to find out. For example, you might want to find out what the causes of this problem are. But a more formal way of saying this would be to discover something or to attempt to understand or comprehend a particular problem or its causes. So now I promise you that we will talk about the phrasal verbs that are actually used and are common in academic writing. As I said, there aren't many of them, but I would like to highlight three that are very, very common and very appropriate as well in academic writing. The first of them is the phrasal verb to carry out. This basically means to do a study, to carry out a study. You can also carry out an analysis, an investigation, and so on, right? And this is used very, very commonly. Another phrasal verb that's very common is look at. This is very often used in phrases like, in this paper, we looked at the problem of da-da-da, right? And it basically means we analyzed, we investigated, and it's commonly used in academic writing. And the last phrasal verbs that you will also encounter very often is acceptable in academic writing is to point out. This is often used when reporting participants' views in your results if you've done a qualitative study, but also to comment on what other researchers observed in their studies when you're writing the literature review. So you could, for example, say that the first interviewee pointed out that. In other words, they said that. So to sum up, in general, you probably want to avoid as many phrasal verbs as possible in order to make your English formal and academic. However, there are a few such as look at, carry out, or point out that are acceptable in academic writing. If you have questions about phrasal verbs, then please use the comments below to let me know which phrasal verbs you're not sure whether are acceptable or not in academic writing. And if you enjoyed this video, then definitely hit the subscribe button and that bell button so we can continue improving your academic writing together here on this channel. And if you want to dive deeper into academic writing, then join my 5-day Instant Better Academic Writing Challenge, where in just 10 minutes a day, you're going to improve your academic writing, and the link is right below this video.